Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Cal Revs, the chest of the best. The adventurer's best friend where you can get everything you want for just your top half off. And tonight, we're talking shop. The Magnus Protocol, episode 15, Well Run. This was an uncomfortable delight to listen to. The execution of the episode is in keeping with the way other episodes occur, at least regarding the incidents themselves. As it's told, you can see where it's going, and the resulting dramatic irony makes the horror well pronounced. But what makes it and its resident beasties stand out from the episodes featuring monsters like Needles and Mr. Bonzo is that the monster finds its way to our cast and into their relative safe space. But we'll get to that shortly. Hello! I hope everyone had a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, or week. Regardless of whatever we're referring to, I hope everyone is doing well. And I hope that you all agree that episode 15 was a phenomenally executed episode indeed. As I said, had a great time listening to it. I was at work basically, desk warming, and just on the edge of my seat the entire time, tense, well aware of where exactly the horror was going and in which direction it would be going with regards to the person giving the statement. But that doesn't change the fact that it was just the writing of it, the foreshadowing of it, and all the implications made by all the people talking. It just made for a very, very engaging episode. Not to say that the series as a whole isn't engaging, but I haven't felt this way since basically since Mr. Bonzo and Needles. Whenever the monster, I guess, interacts with our cast, it always tends to bring out the I guess the giddiness out of me. I don't know what to say. I don't know how else to describe it. But rather than spend too much time gushing over it, we can save that for the end. Why don't we go ahead and just jump straight into the analysis of this episode? The episode takes place on March 22nd, 2024, about a week after the previous episode. It starts with Sam and Celia flirting in the office before Sam invites Celia out for a second date to the theater. She happily agrees before Alice pops in and invites both of them to her brother's band performance later in the evening. They turn her down, however, with Sam clearly a little annoyed with her. Cut to the incident. It's a voicemail. The caller trying to reach the Sentinel, a journal of sorts, in hopes to get his story out so that others can know what he's been through, what they, quote unquote, are doing. He doesn't introduce who he is. He simply says that he is a caterer, founder of his own company that serves the upper class. The upper class. The money talks but wealth whispers level of upper class. His group had been asked to cater to a family shoot, the hunting kind, not the family portrait kind, and were asked to prepare the game afterwards. There, his group of 6, counting himself, were simply ordered to prepare while people arrived. Though no one ever left their cars, they just watched. At sunset, the matriarch of the mansion finally sets out, accompanied by nondescript hunters, her hounds, and shouldering a large elephant rifle. The caterer describes her big, imposing, like some Roman statue brought to life and given a gun. She asks if they've prepared, and when he affirms he has the guns raised at them and orders them to hunt. When they don't understand, she shoots one of them and repeats her order, smiling. That's when the caterer realizes, and he arms himself with one of the cleavers and slays his staff as they flee from him and into the surrounding woodlands. When all is done, the caterer presumes that the party eats well and packs to leave. The matriarch shakes his hand and compliments him, pays him for his services rendered, but leaves him a note with his pay that simply reads, "Run." Which brings us to the current voicemail, him stating his intent to flee the country before violently being gunned down by the matriarch, who ends his call for him, saying, quote, "Well run, dear." We cut back to Celia as she reacts to the incident, and the timing couldn't have been better because a woman, implied to be the matriarch herself, is just over her shoulder, fascinated by the incident. She takes a keen interest in Celia, who is defiant in the face of snarling hounds held back by the matriarch's orders and her own taunting. That, and the matriarch notes that Celia is very different. Something about the air she gives off, the scent, is different enough that when Gwen arrives, revealing herself to be the one who called Lady Mowbray to the OIR in the first place, she lingers, wondering what it is that makes Celia different. Celia, however, is unshaken as she firmly tells Lady Mowbray that she will not be, quote, catching Celia later, a remark that gets a chuckle from Lady Mowbray before she makes small talk with Gwen about her family. We cut to Alice, who's celebrating her brother's success as a musician, having come out to his show to find it packed. The two share drinks, share a laugh, and presumably catch up. We cut again to a new scene. This one marked by a tape recorder, where a woman is wandering the streets, rambling about drowning and taking uneven breaths as if she were taking breaths after coming out of the water. Alice runs into her as the woman's rambling becomes more fervorous, and the woman grabs Alice before she starts coughing, gasping for air as if drowning before exhaling and seemingly stopping her breath entirely. As Alice is calling emergency services and trying desperately to revive her, the woman revives herself, continuing her rambling, more clearly and articulated. Alice flees as the woman's voice grows, and she ends her monologue. And the episode ends. Filed CAT1RB 6451-2206-2023 2203-2024. Categorized under Hunt, subcategory Aristocratic, and cross-linked with Compulsion. Now, we should probably go ahead and start with the incident since it appears to be the most prominent. I mean, it always is the prominent aspect, but a lot is demonstrated here, but at the same time, not as much when compared to previous episodes. Obvious archives elements is probably the best way to start, as always. Hunt doesn't leave a lot of room for imagination, and neither does the possibility that those who were hunted were later eaten by the hunting party. The hunt and flesh are perhaps the most obvious combination of the original entities, and they are present here in spades. No points for pointing out the smoking gun in their hands. Of course, they're not usually blended together in statements back in archives. If someone's on a hunt, rarely do they also consume their quarry unless they're explicitly also an aspect of the flesh. To have them both present is the most natural thing, and yet this feels like the first time we see them together properly. Even post-change, I think one of the hunt domains just had the wandering pack hunt down a quarry, take it down, then immediately pick a new one. They never seem to stay long enough to enjoy a meal from their hunt. Moreover, the presentation here, a high-born, blue-blood, noble, intimidating in countenance and disposition, there's something unsettling about it. The depraved aristocrat trope is not new, but pairing it with the scarily competent tracker trope, it reminds me of Richard Connell's The Most Dangerous Game. But imagining that story where the hunter has a supernatural edge as well, I don't know. Something about this episode seems just more unsettling in that respect. I guess it's a case of an evil looking like anyone else aspect. Though obviously we know that Lady Mowbray is anything but an everyday evil, even as a high-born aristocrat. So, let's talk about her. Seemingly an avatar of the hunt with some smattering of the flesh thrown in there for depravity's sake. However, she seems to have some sort of compulsion power. While her first orders to the caterer and his group aren't immediately followed, the caterer didn't stop when it came down to it. Even after the hunt presumably took him into the woodlands afterwards, and even after he says that he didn't deserve what happened to them. Even earlier than then, when the caterer tried to voice a question, she simply held up her hand, and he fell silent immediately. Her dogs listened to her commands. How much of it is simply confidence compounded by fear from subjects or supernaturally enforced compulsion is hard to tell. But if there's something to the cross-linked compulsion tag, then there's also an element of the web as well. Fitting for someone apparently so absurdly wealthy as to not need to show it off in her accessories, i.e., her gun. As the saying goes, money talks, but wealth whispers. It's that money tugging at the strings of the world aspect that could give her some ounce of web influence, but what is this woman doing with her wealth then? What secrets does her wealth whisper? How many other hapless victims have been the subject of her depravity? One thing is for certain, she is a contracted external for the OIAR, which means the questions we have about Mr. Bonzo extend to her. Is she called upon for specific purposes or specific targets? How does her hunting differ from Mr. Bonzo's? Or is it that the OIAR cycles through their externals to keep everything, quote, balanced? To keep the scales tipped in favor of no one, much like how Smirk approached architecture as a means of containing the entities. It would make sense if that's how the OIR is approaching this, and it would also show that they don't really know what they're doing, that no one listened to the tapes. Next, of course, is who she's expected to target and why. We were wrong about Mr. Bonzo targeting Colin, but then who did Mr. Bonzo eat? And who is Lady Mowbray expected to hunt? And how many people do the OIR just have tagged for elimination that they need another external to act within a month of the last one? Guess we'll have to wait and see. At the very least, we can see that the entities are getting along well. She doesn't seem annoyed with the OAR having access to her hunt via Freddy, though hunters have been under the wing of other entities before, so that doesn't necessarily mean anything. And we can't completely rely on the assumption that the OAR is a stronghold of the eye, no matter how much evidence circumstantially supports the notion. One final note regarding Lady Mowbray. Celia. The girl was not kidding when she said she's not much scared these days. Or that not much scares her these days. There's no way Celia doesn't think that Lady Mowbray and the matriarch in the incident are the same. She already states that she thinks they're real. The parallels are there. If we know they're the same, then Celia, who knows just a little bit more than we do, absolutely knows. But she doesn't back down. Lady Mowbray doesn't taunt her per se, but she seems to be used to people being in awe of her. She's used to being imposing. But Celia doesn't buckle. She doesn't give her name, and when Lady Mowbray cheekily says she'll catch Celia later, Celia is defiant and adamant that Lady Mowbray will not. I feel like, based off of her behavior, when everything really goes to hell, Celia is going to be our resident badass. That said, their interaction also highlights that Celia really is different at a deeper level compared to everyone else. Apparently, the air she gives off isn't just weird for us as the audience, it's literally weird for a hunter like Lady Mowbray, who apparently can literally smell the difference. She can't place a reason why, she just knows that there's something about Celia that is deeply unusual. Which we know. I mean, I started questioning her possibly otherworldly origins because of Jack, but Lady Mowbray's assessment serves to keep that possibility firmly open. Not that anything was closing it, but perhaps Jack is a child literally of two worlds. Maybe to cope With being in a new world, Celia did cut a little loose, and Jack helped her to ground herself. It's a prediction. At the very least, it could be a case of exact words, considering the audio never glitched when she first talked about Jack with Sam. Here, quotation, in that context, maybe didn't mean London, but meant this whole universe as it is. A royal here, if you will. But let's leave Celia to her secrets. Patience is the name of the game where she's concerned. Besides, despite her secrets probably being the most mysterious and the most interesting, she's honestly the least concerning character of the OAR team. You know who is concerning? The mysterious, rambling, dry-drowning stranger that Alice encounters on her way home. Just what the hell was that woman? For analysis' sake, let's go over what she does and how Alice reacts. From the way Alice reacts to her, it may be safe to assume that the woman is disheveled in appearance, perhaps looking homeless. The entire time that Alice interacts with the woman, she never stops her monologue, which, when we take out Alice's lines in the script, is as follows, quote, "The second time is up. I try to grasp the air and fill my lungs that burn and rattle full. I can't. There's so much air, but none inside as I go down. Again, the cold surrounds and drags me down, the blue, the black, the weight of all the sodden fates awaiting me below the line of sea and sky. I kick, I lunge, I flail towards the bright and blue and break the third and final time. I know I'm spent. There's no more within me save the salt-spun death that reaches down my throat and spasms in my chest that cannot breathe inside me, coughs and sputters and tries to push it out, but more comes in and down I go the third and final time. I know it's done. I'm done. The water is dark." Followed by coughing, sputtering, gasping, and drowning sounds, with the woman breathing out and going still for a few minutes before reviving and continuing. Deeper, deeper, down among the dead and swollen flesh so pale within this lightless place where eyes are open cloudy white, and all the water pushes down upon a lifeless form that sinks and sinks down to the bottom that is not there. No sandy grave below the swell, no rest among the coral and the depths I feared so much, but reached up and overland to claim me still. Spooky. And phenomenally written, I have to say. Now, obviously, we don't know who this woman is. At least, there's no indication that we could. We could maybe point a figure in a particular figure's direction. Remember, at the end of episode 10 Saturday Nights? After Sam and Alice visited the Magnus Institute ruins, the key they found was used by something to free another something that rose up out of the hidden tunnels under the Institute. Whatever that thing was, named in credits as simply Error, it came out breathing in a husky, raspy voice, not too dissimilar from how our stranger, named Drowning Victim in the credits, is constantly taking breaths until they're revived. It is certainly possible that Error and the Drowning Victim are one and the same. It could tie in with A, how Alice feels like she's being followed ever since she left the Institute, leading to some speculation that Error was targeting her, because, the Drowning Victim did grab her at some point. And B, it could explain how the Drowning Victim has a tape recorder in this moment. That's right, if you paid attention during the episode, you'd hear the telltale sound of a tape recorder starting up in the beginning of the scene. One issue, however, the voice actresses are different. Now, that's not necessarily hard evidence, but Error is voiced by one Beth Ayer, while the Drowning Victim is voiced by Laura Sawalha. I'm probably butchering those, but that's how it's written in the credits for both episodes. Now, this doesn't guarantee that Error's VA is dedicated to that role with no one else filling in, but it is worth considering. So if we discount the drowning victim as being error, what does that leave us? Wild mass guessing again, I'm afraid. Her possession of a tape recorder is still notable. She clearly values the tape recorder. She's recording herself when she appears, and even when she loses the tape recorder, evidenced by her distant voice, she still goes to retrieve it as her voice grows louder at the end. And what is she recording? A vivid and terror-riddled account of drowning, about breaking through the water surface, trying to catch a breath in her waterlogged lungs before sinking deep into the sea, surrounded by other drowned victims as they sink further towards a bottom that doesn't exist. Elegantly described, despite the morbid implications. And because of how descriptive her monologue is, it gives us a lot to unpack. An examination of her words gives us themes of suffocation and drowning, vast depths, fading light and oppressing darkness, death, and reclamation. These are all blended themes of the buried, the dark, the vast, and the end. The idea of something in the sea reaching up and claiming its due calls to mind episode 11, Marked, where the groundworks worker became obsessed with the sea and talked about how everything returns to the sea. A theme that is rather new to Magnus. The way she rambles is so elegant, it reminds me of whenever an archivist or eye servant forces someone to answer questions or tell their story. They become more articulate than they would be otherwise. Here, though, the way she describes her suffering is so distant. Less like she's describing what she experienced firsthand, and more like she's detached herself from the experience and is merely narrating it, like it happened to someone else. It's similar to John's statements in the post-change world, or how Elias consumed fear as the pupil of the eye, as if they were merely readers of a book. As if, to punctuate this, she's telling it all into a tape recorder, a tool of the web to capture the voice of the archivist and lure the fears away through the gap in reality. Taking as much of this into consideration, what we have here is a victim of an entity of some sort, obviously, but perhaps she's become something else by the end. Her exploration reminds me of Oliver Banks when he became an avatar of the end, or John when he fully embraced becoming an avatar of the eye. I think the woman we meet is well and truly dying in the beginning and emerges from some deeply profound metamorphosis by the end. Now an avatar of some ocean-themed entity? Which, by the way, considering we have 2 explicit references to the ocean claiming its due, we might want to consider the ocean as a distinct entity separate from the vast, but we'll set that aside for now. Now, where does the tape recorder come in? Well, I'm guessing that this ties into my idea that the web is trying to orchestrate events similar to what occurred in archives, capturing the voices of fear on tape to form its net. However, that plan was dependent on the archivist's voice being the lure. It hinged on the eye succeeding in bringing everyone through, and thus being what pulls the rest of them out. However, the drowning victim's monologue is in the first person, implying it's not watching someone else's terror, no matter how detached she is from the horror, suggesting that her eye attachment isn't that great, certainly not to the level of an archivist. So, is the web trying to use other avatars? Does it think that any avatar will do as long as they are marked by as many as possible? The fact that blended incidents are far more frequent in this series, perhaps they simply aren't afforded the luxury of being picky. But then again, unforeseen consequences and intricate plans are in its nature. So, what if they had multiple Johns that they could have used during archives, and we're just seeing their multifaceted nature in action? Or, what if the reason someone's fear is good to be recorded directly regardless of being an archivist, is because of something else. The way the drowned victim dictates is similar to John's style of narration post-changed, just in first person. We've taken the idea that John and Martin were dragged here at face value. What if they weren't the only ones? Annabelle said she might be dragged along, but what if it's not just avatars or random bystanders like Celia, if indeed Celia was dragged here? What about other victims? Actual victims that weren't able to escape their domains. In the post-change world, only those in the domain of the end could truly die. All others were forced to live and relive their greatest fears. Dying, but staying conscious as they were chopped up, cratered by artillery, dropped from great heights, or drowned. Reviving to go through it all over again. What if the drowning victim is truly still a victim, having never been released, but now given the task of recording their terror for another net? But why was she left to wander? To spread her fear? Does that make her a pseudo-avatar of sorts? We'll simply have to wait until she or someone like her makes an appearance. And of course, we should note this as another instance of a tape recorder being used. I still have this feeling that there will be a connecting thread that ties incidents using a tape recorder together, not unlike how there are apparently patterns behind which incidents are dictated by Freddy and by which voices. But again, these are merely hypotheses and conjecture and speculation that don't quite have teeth to them just yet. So, we'll set her aside for now, but I get the sinking suspicion that we will be seeing our drowned victim again, or others like her. And we'll get a chance to see exactly what happened to them post-dictation, I suppose. Meanwhile, why don't we take this opportunity to look at everyone else in this world? Colin? Probably fine. He is missing in action, though, so probably someone we should be worried about. Maybe Lady Mowbray is supposed to be targeting him now, but until we get that in an incident and get that in writing, nothing we can really say. Dude's definitely doing a better job of staying out of sight of the cameras, though. Or maybe it's too late. Meanwhile, Lena's plotting. No idea what she's plotting still. Gwen's getting well acquainted with another external. Sam and Celia are getting on really well. And hey, we finally got to meet Luke. He seems like a swell lad, well-adjusted, seeming to be on the cusp of a degree of success in the music industry and paired with such a loving and supportive sister, Alice. Yes, being the sibling of the character that copes with hardship, with jokes and sarcasm in a universe plagued with eldritch horrors must be nice. Which is a change of pace, because it wasn't in Archives. Listen, I've drawn comparisons between Alice and Tim on multiple occasions, and I'm not the only one, for sure. And with Tim's brother's death being the motivating factor behind his actions, I mentioned this earlier in this series, but I would hate for that same motivation to factor into Alice's character arc. But I think something similar would pop in. But I also would hate, I don't want that to be the case. I would prefer Luke not meet some horrific end at the hands of some horrific eldritch monster or component of such monster. I don't think Alice can handle it. I don't know if she can be that level of repressed wrath that Tim was, all right? Tim was a bomb waiting to explode. Alice tries so dang hard to bottle it up that she seems less of a ticking time bomb and more like a dam. I think if it comes down to it, if she breaks, she'll just drown in it. But also, I feel like Luke suffering horrifically would go against my own prediction. See, it's suggested in the episode that Luke's success is starting to ramp up. He's involved in multiple groups, at least two, Dredgerman and A Penny for the Well. He's going on tours, he's bringing in crowds, and he's finding success in that. Finally. Meanwhile, him and Alice are clearly trying to save money to get something back, as evidenced by her conversation with him in episode 5. Drawing on what's happened in the previous episodes with the themes of desperation that I've managed to suss out, trying to rise up from feelings of inadequacy or obsession, I got to wondering. It would be just swell if the joking character lost their sibling like Tim did long ago in Archives, but I still believe that Alice is not like Tim, that her jovial nature hides sadness and helplessness rather than deep-seated anger. My prediction is that Luke is taking notes from episode 4. We've seen one musician find success in this series, and we saw how he did it. What if Luke's means of success are supernatural and more morbid in nature? I just think it'd be amazing foreshadowing if that was the case. Like, everything leading up to this point, it would just be a phenomenal achievement of writing in my most humble perspective. And I'd love to explore the consequences of what that could mean, as well as it fitting in well with the themes that I have presented up to this point. But it's too early. And it's just wild speculation on my part and me gushing over the writing and assuming that it's going to go in this direction. Perhaps I might start exploring my predictions more thoroughly post-season 1 or in a separate video. Either way, now that we have heard Luke proper, one can only assume that at some point in time he is going to be heard yet again. And while I do have my predictions, I certainly do hope that nothing bad befalls him. But knowing how this series, its previous series, plays out, hoping for the best is a luxury. One that only the characters afford to have, but we as audience members, tragically, know better. But anyways, with that brings us to the end of episode 15, well run, of the Magnus Protocol. The next episode, episode 16, should be dropping in a couple of hours for those of you who are not patrons of Rusty Quill's Patreon, essentially. So, yeah, after you've listened to this, maybe you can go ahead and give that one a listen. I certainly am going to be listening to it over the weekend or maybe during my desk warming days, and I'm just ready. I'm just absolutely ready to give that a listen. Things seem like everything seems to have been, the tension has been rising for a good long while now. I think we're a good long ways away from a proper climax, but I believe the season is reaching a point. I do believe that the season is going to end in a couple of episodes. I believe they planned to have the seasons about 21 episodes each, with 3 seasons planned out. So we'll see what happens. I imagine that whatever ends up happening in the next couple of episodes is going to be, I imagine there's just going to be a lot of questions that rise up. As if we haven't been getting a lot of questions up to this point already, but we're probably going to get some major reveal, and that is going to cause us to speculate wildly, even more so than we have up to this point. Something game-changing is what I expect, but that's for all of us to sit and twiddle our thumbs thinking about. Go ahead and get ready for the next episode, because I am excited for it. I'm talking like I wrote the dang thing. I did not. But I can't wait for it. in case that wasn't clear. But anyways, that's all for tonight. If you have any other theories or hypotheses or any predictions or speculations that you would like to share and you're watching the VOD, by all means, please leave that in the comment section. Leave a like, subscribe, share, and follow me on Twitch. And thank you guys so much for popping in, hanging out, and being your beautiful selves. With that being said, shop's closed. Get out. Bye-bye.